Hi everyone. This week we'll talk about learning disability. First, let's define learning disability. Actually, it's a disorder in the processing of information involved in understanding and using language. If a person has a learning disability, we see that he or she has difficulties in learning anything. But especially those people have difficulties in reading and writing, but some are having difficulties in spelling and maths as well. And for these people, in order to have some academic success, special education services are mandatory. And we see that actually while working with learning disabled people, uh, sometimes you get really surprised at their potential. They do something and they surprise you. And if you work at a school setting or even at private setting, you will hear from either the teacher or the parents or everybody around that these people sometimes surprise you. They tell you that, oh, Burcu Hanım, he did this and previously he wasn't able to do it, but tomorrow he wasn't able to do the same thing. Actually, they have that potential, but after a while, after a time, the discrepancy between that potential and the result gets larger, and the student or the person with that learning disability is not able to perform his performance anymore. Okay, so you should consider the both the potential and the achievement of those people in real life. When we consider the causes of learning disabilities, genetic factors, neurological factors, and teratogenic factors such as the use of alcohol and drugs and medical factors towards our knowledge cause learning disabilities. But at the main point, for people with learning disabilities, whatever the causes, we should know that they have difficulty in information processing. And in this regard, having a learning disability means that the brain processes the information differently than most other people. That is, certain kinds of information get stuck or lost while traveling through the brain of the person with learning disability. Um, I will give a Turkish example. Ben çok fazla ilkokul seviyesinde dislektik ve dikkat eksikliği olan çocukla çalıştım. Ve tanımlayabileceğim Türkçe terim herhalde şu olurdu. Burada bir tıpa olduğunu düşünün. O orada duruyor, stuck. Ve o kişiyle çalışan uzmanı o tıpayı oynatması lazım. Oynatacak, 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 sonra pıt çıkaracak ki bilgi akışı olsun. So this word getting stuck makes so sense to me. But okay, we are talking about information processing, and we say that learning disabled people have these sufferings in this information process. But what is this information processing? Maybe you have already know it, learned it. Information processing refers to how your brain takes the information in, uses the information, stores the information in memory, especially short-term memory, retrieves the information from the memory and expresses it out. Okay, and actually we see that students and people with learning disabilities struggle with certain kinds of learning because they have difficulty processing those certain kinds of information. It is again this example, it's like when you go on a car trip and get stuck in road construction and need to take a detour. It takes you a longer time to get where you are going. So it's the same fit with information going through the brain of a student with learning disabilities. So as you see in the exam, in the headlines below, they have difficulties with visual processing, auditory processing, and since something is stuck and they need to detour all the way, then their processing speed is slow when compared to their peers actually. And we'll see that their object orientation is different from their peers. Let's first talk about visual processing. It involves how well a student can use visual information when he sees something, and especially something complex. The example: does he understand it quickly and easily? Can he visualize things? Let's like pictures, shapes, words, etc. in his head. Can he remember information that he sees? Now check yourself. What about your visual processing? Are you able to remember people whom you saw just once? Or are you able to remember the roles with signs to make you remember later? These are visual processing. Actually, based on the examples I have given, they are very vital. They are very important to survive in this life, right? Remembering, seeing it, keeping it in mind, and afterwards converting it to be able to use later. But these learning disabled people have difficulties in this visual processing. Let's see how. Now I'll ask you to read this story, and you will have a question in a minute. And first read this story, and afterwards answer these questions related to this story. And please tell me, were you able to read the materials, and did you have any difficulties reading these? And please write your answers under the video on YouTube comments, therefore we will be able to see each other's answers. Actually, here are the correct versions. Why don't you just compare to what you have read to the original form? Actually, these correspond to visual processing of learning disabled people. They have difficulties seeing the letters, the words, the sentences the way we do. In their brain, their object orientation is different than normally functioning people's. Hence, they convert the letters, they convert the numbers. Hence, their way of reading and also writing gets affected with this problem in visual processing. And the other thing is auditory processing, and it involves how well a student can use auditory information. For example, when he hears something, especially something detailed, does he understand it quickly and easily? Can he hear things like sounds, numbers, words, etc. in his head? Can he remember that information he hears? Okay, these are the three questions we are asking for both visual and auditory processing. I had given you an example on hearing the things outside. I had students, I had clients who were not able to hear the things that were going on outside or in the external world. And sometimes they were hearing, but afterwards they were not able to remember it. Another important thing that you need to consider in learning disabled people is their processing speed. Processing speed refers to how fast information travels throughout the brain. You will see that a person with a learning disability will be slow. And if you are a good observer, you can just understand it anyway. You can understand that the information is really being processed very slowly when compared to their peers. So this can be a tool for you if you want to be a school counselor, or even if you want to work at a private practice. You should check this processing speed. As an example, Let's assume that you ask a student, a child, a person with a learning disability, the question, who was the first president of the United States? The processing speed for that child would be like this. Who? Okay, this is a question. Was. This means that it happened in past. First, number one, President of United States, leader of nation. Okay, this is too slow, but generally they go through these steps. And one more thing to consider is object orientation or object identification. You must have heard before that dyslexic people mostly confuse P with B, Q, D, and they see the B but write or read D. Okay, so their object orientation and identification are different. For this M, actually, for M, they converted and see it W. For E, they check it but see it 3. Okay, these are the clues for identifying a person with a learning disability. Okay, what about these learning difficulties? Actually, they are grouped under 4. If a person has difficulty learning to read, this is dyslexia. Mostly, dyslexia accompanies with dysgraphia, where there is severe difficulty learning to write. And if a person has severe difficulty learning to do mathematical computations, then this is called dyscalculia. And we have dysorthographia. This is having difficulty learning to spell. Okay, and let's go through how we will assess these cases. Actually, there are 4 types of assessment for learning disabilities. One is standardized achievement assessments, achievement tests. First one is Wechsler individual assessment test. They basically search for basic reading, comprehension, and oral expression. And VSCAR, not just recently we have VISC4. It gives you information about performance on oral and mathematical abilities. And CASE cognitive assessment system is an alternative. We have this, I think, in the last decade in Turkey, and it gives us information about the steps of information processing of learning disabled child, so we are able to assess at which area, at which step of information processing does the learning disabled child have difficulty. Hence, accordingly, you make up a plan to work with the child. Okay, secondly, we have formative assessments, and this focus on how students perform with their own abilities rather than being compared with others. Remember that when we were talking about special education's definition and exceptional learners, we were considering the abilities of the students or the people, and these formative assessments are done by the teacher, and they are curriculum-based assessments styles. The teacher observes the child in terms of his or her following the curriculum or not. And the third one is informal assessment, and mostly teachers, again at school settings, use every day to evaluate the progress and comprehension skills of their individual students. Okay, and the fourth one is authentic assessment. This evaluates students' critical thinking and problem-solving ability in real-life situations. And actually, authentic assessment utilizes from inventors, peer ratings, self-ratings, and journals, portfolios, discussions, and interviews in order to assess the critical thinking abilities of the child. And at the beginning of my presentation, I have said that you will observe a discrepancy between the potential and the achievement of learning disabled children. And so search for it, because except for this, we don't have any sign to name a certain person as learning disabled. For example, if you see a Down syndrome person, you say that he or she has Down syndrome. But for a learning disabled person, you can't say that she or he has a learning disability. Okay, and now briefly we will go through the general characteristics of people with learning disabilities. They may have trouble learning the alphabet or connecting letters to their sounds. They may make many mistakes when reading aloud and repeating and pausing often. What was the type of learning disability related to reading? Try to guess it. And they may not understand what he or she reads. Again, the same question is valid for this. And they may have some trouble with spelling. What was the type of learning disability which was associated with difficulty with spelling? Answer this question. And they may confuse math symbols and misread numbers. What is this related to? And they may have very messy handwriting or hold the pencil awkwardly. Yes, exactly. When I was studying with dyslexic children, the first thing I was looking was their way of holding a pencil. They usually hold it like this. They try to write this way. They have difficulty. So mostly for those children, I propose them there is an apparatus that is put here in order to arrange the fingers and to write correctly. Okay, they may learn language late, they may have a limited vocabulary, and they may sometimes have some problems with social rules, such as taking turns, and they may have trouble remembering the sounds that letters make or hearing slight differences between words which correspond to auditory processing problems. They may have trouble following directions. They may not be able to retell a story in order. They may mispronounce words, and they may have trouble organizing what he or she wants to say, or not be able to think of the word he or she needs for writing or conversation. Here are our famous people with learning disability. We are living all together, and mostly based on my observations and my experiences. Remember that I have mentioned you about twice exceptionality. These people, although they have learning disabilities, have gifted parts as well, or let's say may have gifted parts as well. Mostly they are twice exceptional. Now I have a question for you. Assume that you are a school counselor or a school psychologist, and you are working at second grade students, working with second grade students and their teachers. And one of the teachers whom you are working with tells you that Ali in her class has difficulty learning reading and writing. Please take into consideration your previous knowledge on special education and current practices we had covered in class, and come up with a prevention and intervention program for Ali. Deadline is 30th of March, 5 p.m. You can send it to me. This may not exceed one paragraph. Actually, you can write it under the comments part in YouTube, because it will be around the paragraph. just briefly mention the milestones of your prevention and interventions. Okay, take care, try to stay tuned with what we are doing, and please don't forget to give me feedback on these videos. This is our second video, so accordingly I will try to manage if we need anything else or if I can do anything else. Bye bye, see you.